SNP Supremo in Chief Alex Salmond. Welcome back, Alex Salmond. Liz, does the House of Lords vote matter?
I hope it does. I hope it persuades some Conservative MPs to change their mind and back that amendment. I think it is the right thing to do for people who came here believing, their future would be secure. It's actually right for our economy at the moment because we need EU citizens doing those jobs. And I think it's also, if we did it, it would be a signal of goodwill in terms of the negotiations with the rest of Europe.
But given all that, Labour's going to throw in the towel after one round of ping-pong, aren't they?
Well, we accept the result of the referendum. I wish it was something otherwise, but it is. The referendum happened, and I believe when we have referendums, we accept the result.
So the House of Commons vote, the House of Lords vote probably won't matter, will it?
No, not if Labour raise the white flag in it. It's actually the weakest point of the bill, because there probably is a natural majority, even in the Commons, who, if left to their own devices,
would
say that you should unilaterally give that assurance. But, of course, the point you make about resolve, I mean, if a government's going to back down, they have to believe that the opposition are going to take the matter all the way.
And they don't.
They don't, and therefore that's a big weakness. And nor do I accept, incidentally, that people say, oh, well, that's the result of the referendum. And the referendum didn't, on the ballot paper, say European citizens will have their rights jeopardised. It didn't say we're coming out of the single market. It's a perfectly legitimate case for putting the heat on the government far, far more than the opposition is doing.
The House of Lords is full of people who want a soft Brexit rather than a hard Brexit. But if you give away an important point before we've had a negotiation, it follows that the Brexit will be harder than it otherwise would be.
No, it doesn't follow at all. I rather agree about the gesture of goodwill. I think at the end of the day, everybody believes that the rights of European citizens in the UK and the rights of UK citizens in the European Union will not be jeopardised, will be protected. And therefore this is a kind of false aspect of negotiation.
Well, then don't worry about it. Don't interfere with the bill.
Yes, except, of course, that people concerned... It's very well for you to sit on the sofa and say that, but for people who are actually at the hot end of this, who've had their position described as a bargaining chip, my constituents don't see this as obvious.
Well, as Norman Tebbit said, you're worrying about the people living in Britain without worrying about the British people who live in...
Actually, the more important amendment is about trying to get Parliament to have a meaningful vote on the final relationship.
Oh, that's such humbug.
It is not, because that is the way that we, I think, do keep the pressure up on Theresa May not to have a hard Brexit. It also, I think, would strengthen her hand with the EU. Look, I know you disagree, because she would be able to say to them, the House won't support it if you give us a bad deal. That's what's so important about it.
It's completely false. Look, we spend years negotiating with the European Union. At the end, we get the best possible deal that we can, and it's brought back to Britain, and Parliament says, oh, no, that's not good enough. And you really think the European Union will then say, oh, well, sorry, we didn't realise that the House of Commons wouldn't agree with it.
Why should we have fewer powers than MEPs, who can do much more to scrutinise what the Commission does?
We're about to have many more powers than MEPs by leaving the European Union.
They can send them back. I would have thought you'd have wanted British MPs to have the same power as MEPs do.
Very well. Enough Europe. Let's move on to Scotland. Why isn't Nicola Sturgeon as keen as you are to have a second independence referendum?
Oh, I don't. Well, I'm sure there's no difference between us in that. But I think Nicola's going about things in exactly the right way. She's offered a series of compromise proposals. They've been knocked down one by one. The last remaining one is the proposal to keep Scotland within the single market, even if the rest of the UK goes out. An argument which has been described as possible by a cabinet minister. And that's the one that the UK government have still to respond.
So if they don't respond in the way that she would like, if they don't, will there be a second referendum?
Well, the criteria is to put it in as part of the negotiating position, to say that's what's
and my understanding is the government isn't going to go down that route, rightly or wrongly.
You'll forgive Nicola Sturgeon if she waits for the government.
No, of course. But will there be a second referendum or not?
Well, I tell you what, I was struck by a quote from Downing Street source, I think it was in the Times this week, which said, we might have 3 constitutional crises together: Brexit, a Scottish referendum and direct rule in Northern Ireland. And the really interesting thing about that quote, it was said as if all these things were coming along as an act of God. They're within the ability of Downing Street to have them all together or not to have them all together.
But I didn't ask about an anonymous Downing Street quote. I asked if, in your view, there would be a second independence referendum.
Well, if the government sweeps aside the compromise proposal from Nicola Sturgeon, we're not interested in the view of the Scottish Parliament, jobs, investment and security of the single marketplace, then in Nicola Sturgeon's own words, an independence referendum becomes very likely.
But she's, the issue here is she's not going to call or try and get the second referendum unless she thinks she can win it. And actually, there's no evidence in the polls that there's more support for that now than at the time.
The last one was 49%.
That's a real political problem. Two-thirds of people don't want a second referendum.
That's not true either.
But can I just finish, Alex? You haven't spoken for quite a while.
I was merely going to say...
No, hold on. Let's get what have to say, like everyone else.
Don't want a second referendum, and if there was one, it looks like there'll be the same result. And the truth is, that's a real political problem for the SNP.
Right. Okay. Take the 2 points together. There's been 18 polls since the Brexit vote. 17 out of the 18 have shown support for independence on a binary choice higher than it was in September 2014. That's just a fact. And secondly,
but they still show the minority, though.
Not all of them. I think 3 have shown a majority.
Right. On a poll of polls, there would still be a vote against
about
independence.
48%. The last poll was 49%. So, I called the independence referendum was at 28% yes vote, if I remember correctly, back in 2012. If I was prepared to do it at 28%, I don't think Nicola Sturgeon will have much compunction at doing it at 47%.
But Nicola Sturgeon has always maintained that there would only be a second referendum if it was the clear will of the Scottish people to have a second referendum, and the polls certainly don't show that.
Well, the exact manifesto commitment from last year, when she was elected with 47% of the vote in Scotland, it was the Scottish Parliament should have the right to hold a referendum if Scotland is faced with being dragged out of Europe against the will of the Scottish people. Now, that is a very, very clear...
But she's on the record because I've interviewed her myself in this, and she said we'll have one if it's clear the Scottish people want one. And the only way you can judge that is from the polls, and the polls are quite clear that they don't want one.
Well, I've said what I think about the polls. I think if we gained as much ground as we did in the last...
Oh, no, that's how they would vote. I'm talking about having a referendum.
I think specifically Nicola has described the chances of another referendum in the event of that compromise proposal not being accepted or not being included in the UK negotiating position as very likely. And with due respect to the Westminster observers, then you'd be very foolish indeed to underrate the resolve of Miss Sturgeon.
Are you up for a second referendum?
I never underestimate anyone.
I find it just extraordinary that the UK government has managed to put itself in a position where apparently the SNP can call a referendum whenever it feels that the opinion polls are drifting in its direction. The incompetence involved in the United Kingdom's legislation that enabled the first referendum is extraordinary. Alex, of course, said when the first referendum result was concluded that had settled it for a generation. And I think a lot of people will feel very cheated that now the SNP view is that whenever the opinion polls happen to swing in their direction, they'd like to hold another referendum.
But you don't dispute the quote I gave from the SNP manifesto. In the event of Scotland being dragged out of Europe against the will of the Scottish people, then the Scottish Parliament should have the right to hold another. I mean, that's clear enough, Michael. And unlike the Conservative Party...
It's clear enough, but we're not bound to agree with it. We're not bound to agree with it.
Yes, but you're making the point of what's right and wrong.
You said at the time that it was settled for a generation.
Yes, but that was last year, and Nicola Sturgeon, in her manifesto...
That was last year, and now you're saying something else.
That was last year in the manifesto for the Scottish elections. Nicola Sturgeon put forward that proposition.
You've been kicking yourself ever since you said it was settled for a generation.
And received a resounding vote at 47%. Now, that's a manifesto commitment from last year. Are you saying that she doesn't have that commitment or doesn't have that mandate?
You made one mistake when you said it was for a generation, another mistake when you left the leadership.
I've made many mistakes, but probably less than you have.
Can I just ask you on a technical, what if the Westminster government says if you want a second referendum, then you should have a second referendum, but you can't have one until the Brexit deal is done, till the Scottish people know what the choice is, Britain out of the EU on these terms or independence?
Well, I tell you what, Andrew, on a clear manifesto commitment, if there's a majority, if there's a majority in the Scottish Parliament, my view is that boat sailed when David Cameron first resisted the idea of a Scottish referendum.
So you would have a referendum before we knew what the terms of Brexit were?
Well, I think the soonest you have a referendum now is next autumn, a year.
Yeah, but the Brexit deal won't be done by then.
Well, it won't be done, but it'll be the shape of it will be.
No problem. Not the way Europe operates. It won't. It'll be the 11th hour.
Then it'll be the prospect that Nicola Sturgeon could put forward for a certain European future against the uncertainty of Brexit, which seems quite an appealing prospect.
We shall
context in which to hold the referendum.
We shall come back to these certainties or not. Alex Salmond, thank you.